In 1970, the story of the Nobel Prize was already, in large part, a story about the United States. American researchers had spent the previous few decades pulling decisively ahead of the rest of the world, a dramatic reversal from the earliest years of the prize, when Germany and Britain had been the dominant scientific powers on the planet. Since 1970, specifically, American laureates have won more than half of all Nobel Prizes awarded across every category, and in the most recent decades, that figure has climbed even higher, closer to two-thirds of the total. No other country has come remotely close to challenging that lead at any single point across this entire 56-year span. Germany's story runs in almost the opposite direction. In the early 20th century, German researchers and institutions won roughly 30% of all Nobel Prizes handed out, a level of scientific dominance that seems almost unimaginable by today's standards. Two devastating world wars, the physical destruction and political division of German academic institutions, and a massive post-war brain drain toward well-funded American universities changed that completely and permanently. Since World War II, Germany's share of Nobel Prizes has fallen to under 10%, and its total, while still genuinely respectable in absolute terms, has grown only slowly compared to the steadily accelerating American total during the same period. Britain has followed a somewhat milder version of the very same pattern, its share of Nobel Prizes falling from around 20% through the 1970s down to under 10% in more recent years, even as its overall total count has continued to climb steadily in absolute terms year after year. France, Sweden, the home country of the prize itself, and Switzerland have each built solid, consistent records over this same period as well, without ever seriously threatening the American lead at the very top of the global table. The most genuinely interesting story of this entire 56-year period, though, belongs to a country that barely appeared on the list at all back in 1970, Japan. Japanese researchers won only a small handful of Nobel Prizes in the decades immediately following World War II, but that began to change substantially starting in the early 2000s, as decades of sustained investment in scientific research and higher education finally began paying off in a steady, reliable stream of physics, chemistry, and medicine laureates almost every single year. By the mid-2020s, Japan had climbed past both Russia and Switzerland to become one of the most Nobel-decorated nations anywhere in the world, outside the traditional Western scientific powers. A genuinely remarkable rise for a country that had almost no meaningful presence on this particular list at the very start of the period we're covering. The overall picture that emerges from more than half a century of Nobel Prizes, then, is really one of two very different stories happening at once. Remarkable, almost boring stability at the very top of the table, where the United States has never once been seriously challenged since 1970, paired with real, meaningful, and often surprising movement in the ranks just below it, as the center of gravity of global scientific achievement has gradually, quietly, but unmistakably continued to shift eastward.